A text arrives, a simple message, a few words on a screen. But in the mind of the person reading it, 1,000 interpretations begin. Was that tone harsh? Is that emoji genuine or sarcastic? Why did they use a period instead of an exclamation mark? What does the 3-second delay before their response mean? The person reads the message again and again. Each reading generates a new theory, a new fear, a new possibility. They imagine scenarios. They construct narratives. They search for hidden meanings in the spaces between words. Hours pass. The message sits in their mind, unresolved, generating endless analysis. They know at some level that they are overthinking, but they cannot stop, because in a world of digital communication stripped of tone and gesture and presence, the mind rushes in to fill the void with its own stories that are often darker than the truth. Chapter 1, the text that never ends. A text message arrived, a simple message from someone the person cares about or is trying to understand. The message is read, and then it is read again and again. The person's eyes scan the words, searching for tone in written text, searching for intention in brevity. What does this message really mean? Is the person happy, angry, disappointed? How should this be interpreted? The analysis begins. The person might share the message with a friend. What do you think this means? The friend reading the same message might respond with a completely different interpretation. This alternative interpretation takes root. Now the person is trapped between multiple possibilities, none of which can be confirmed. The uncertainty generates anxiety. The anxiety drives more analysis. Hours might pass. The person is at work, supposedly focused on their tasks, but their mind keeps returning to the message. They have not yet responded. The delay in responding creates its own story. What if the other person is waiting? What if they misinterpret the delay as rejection? But if they respond too quickly, what message does that send? The person is caught in a web of implications, each decision fraught with potential meaning. The phenomenon is so common that psychological research has quantified it. Studies show that 78% of people in dating relationships spend an average of 47 minutes daily analyzing text messages, examining response times, emoji choices, and the presence or absence of specific words. For many, the time spent overthinking text messages far exceeds the time the original conversation took to have. What makes text overthinking so uniquely exhausting is that unlike face-to-face conversations, which end and move into the past, text messages exist as permanent records that can be reopened, reread, and reanalyzed indefinitely. A conversation that happened hours or days ago can be retrieved and analyzed yet again, as if the person is trying to extract some additional meaning that they missed in the previous 100 readings. The person may text back a carefully crafted response. They might rewrite it multiple times, each version trying to thread a needle between various possible misunderstandings. If they're being too casual, will it seem cold? If they're being too warm, will it seem needy? The pressure to say exactly the right thing, to craft a message that cannot be misinterpreted, is enormous. And then they send it, and the waiting begins. How long will it take for a response? If the response is delayed, does that mean something? If the response is brief, what does that indicate? If the response contains an emoji, is that genuine or mocking? The cycle perpetuates itself. Each message generates a new round of analysis. The person's mind never rests. The exhaustion is profound. This is not the normal fatigue of a busy day. This is the specific exhaustion of a mind that will not stop working, that keeps running circles through the same material, that cannot arrive at any sense of closure or understanding. The person might sleep poorly because their mind is still analyzing messages. They might find it difficult to focus at work because part of their attention is always elsewhere, caught in text analysis. What is so difficult about text overthinking is that there is no external indicator that something is wrong. The person appears functional, they are responding to messages, they are carrying on their lives, but internally, they are trapped in loops of analysis, desperately searching for a certainty that digital communication simply cannot provide. And there's a strange sense of shame that accompanies this overthinking. The person knows, at some level, that they are spiraling. They know that a text message should not cause this much distress. They know that they are probably misinterpreting. Yet knowing these things does not stop the analysis. The mind continues its relentless search for meaning in words that were perhaps typed hastily while the other person was multitasking, distracted, tired. Chapter 2. The Void of Missing Cues. At the root of text overthinking lies a simple but profound reality. Digital text messages lack the nonverbal cues that carry most of the meaning in human communication. According to research by psychologist Albert Mehrabian, approximately 93% of the emotional content of face-to-face communication comes from tone of voice and body language. Only 7% comes from the actual words spoken. Text messages strip away that 93%, leaving only the bare skeleton of words on a screen. When a person receives a text message, they receive words. They do not receive the smile that would indicate the comment was made in jest. They do not hear the softness in the voice that would indicate affection. They do not see the open body language that would convey acceptance. Their brain, deprived of this information, must fill in the blanks. And because people are anxious, because they are primed to look for threats, because they have learned to fear rejection, the mind tends to fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. Research on sarcasm detection reveals the magnitude of this gap. When people read sarcastic statements in emails or text messages, only 56% correctly identify them as sarcasm. When the same statements are spoken aloud, 79% correctly interpret the sarcasm. The presence or absence of nonverbal cues creates a 23 percentage point difference in comprehension. The text is identical. The nonverbal context changes everything. For people with anxious attachment styles, this ambiguity is particularly triggering. Anxious individuals have learned, through early relational experiences, that they must be hypervigilant to signs of rejection or abandonment. They have learned to read between the lines, to search for hidden meanings, to interpret ambiguous situations in ways that confirm their deepest fears. These individuals have often experienced parents or caregivers who were inconsistent in their attention and affection. Sometimes the parent was warm and engaged, other times they were cold and distant. The child learned to become a mind reader, constantly monitoring for shifts in the parent's mood and trying to predict when the affection might be withdrawn. This pattern continues into adulthood, particularly in digital communication where ambiguity reigns. Perfectionism also amplifies text overthinking. Perfectionistic individuals have learned to believe that worth is tied to flawlessness, that one mistake can lead to rejection. In the context of text communication, perfectionism creates tremendous pressure to craft the perfect message, one that cannot be misinterpreted, one that presents the ideal version of the self. The person becomes trapped in endless revision, convinced that just one more edit might eliminate the possibility of misunderstanding. Early experiences of bullying or social rejection also contribute significantly. A person who experienced social humiliation might have learned that words are weapons, that miscommunication can lead to public shaming. For these individuals, every text message carries the potential for disaster. They search for signs of mockery or judgment because they have experienced these things before and are hyper-vigilant to prevent them from happening again. The technology itself contributes to the overthinking. Text messages often include features like read receipts and typing indicators that provide additional information to analyze. A person might notice that the other person read their message an hour ago, but has not yet responded. They might see the 3 dots indicating the person is typing, then watch as the dots disappear without a message being sent. Each piece of information feeds the rumination machine. Additionally, the asynchronous nature of text communication creates gaps that invite speculation. In a face-to-face conversation, there is immediate feedback. If someone seems confused by what you said, you can immediately clarify. If someone seems upset, you can address it in real time. But in text messaging, there is a gap between message and response. In that gap, the anxious mind constructs elaborate theories about what is happening, what the other person is thinking, what the delay means. The permanent record of digital communication also intensifies overthinking. A comment made in person dissolves into the past. A text message can be retrieved and reread, reanalyzed, seen in a new light as the person's mood or circumstances change. The past is never truly past in digital communication. It remains accessible, modifiable in interpretation, subject to endless review. Chapter 3: The Neurobiology of Digital Anxiety. Text message overthinking is not simply a matter of personality or choice. It is rooted in the brain itself. When a person reads an ambiguous text message, one that could be interpreted multiple ways, their amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, activates as if a real threat has been detected. The body responds to a text message the same way it would respond to a physical threat. Heart rate increases, cortisol is released, the nervous system shifts into a state of readiness. Research using neuroimaging has shown that ambiguous social stimuli activate threat detection regions in the brain far more than clear, unambiguous messages. The brain cannot distinguish between a text message that clearly conveys positive emotion and one that is ambiguous. Both activate the amygdala, but the ambiguous message keeps the amygdala activated, searching for meaning, unable to achieve resolution. This activation of the threat detection system triggers a cascade of neurobiological responses. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking and impulse control, becomes less active as more primitive brain regions take over. The person finds themselves unable to think their way out of the anxiety because the part of the brain responsible for rational thought has been essentially shut down by the activation of the fear system. The default mode network, the set of brain regions that activate it when the mind is not focused on external tasks, becomes hyperactive in people prone to text overthinking. This network is associated with self-referential thinking and rumination. A hyperactive DMN means the person is trapped in loops of self-focused thought, constantly analyzing how the message relates to them, what it means about the relationship, what it reveals about their worth. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation, plays a particularly important role in text message anxiety. Text notifications trigger dopamine release in anticipation of social connection and positive interaction. But when messages are ambiguous or delayed, the reward system becomes dysregulated. This unpredictability is highly addictive. It creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling so compelling. The more a person checks their phone, the more dopamine floods their system in anticipation. But if the message is ambiguous, if the interaction is not satisfying, the dopamine system crashes. This creates a cycle of compulsive checking, desperate searching for the next hit of dopamine. People find themselves repeatedly checking their phones, hoping for a message that will provide clarity or validation. Cortisol, the stress hormone, remains elevated when a person is engaged in chronic text overthinking. Hours spent analyzing messages keep the body in a state of physiological stress. This chronic elevation of cortisol has measurable impacts on health: sleep disruption, reduced immune function, increased inflammation, difficulty concentrating. The brain also shows altered inhibitory control in people prone to text overthinking. The neurological systems that would normally allow a person to stop repetitive thinking are not functioning optimally. The person wants to stop analyzing the message. Their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that governs willpower, is telling them to stop. But the neural habit has become so ingrained that stopping is extraordinarily difficult. What makes text overthinking particularly difficult to break is that it becomes a learned habit at the neural level. Each time a person ruminates about a text message, they strengthen the neural pathways associated with rumination. The behavior becomes increasingly automatic. Over time, the brain becomes trained to ruminate about text messages the way other brains are trained to solve complex mathematics problems. The rumination is efficient at the neural level. It happens automatically and persistently. Research specifically examining text anxiety shows that 47 minutes per day of text message analysis is not unusual for people in relationships. This represents a substantial amount of neural resources devoted to analysis. Imagine if that much mental energy were devoted to other tasks, but instead, the brain is locked in rumination, unable to redirect that energy to more productive endeavors. Chapter 4. The Trap of Seeking Certainty. At the heart of text overthinking lies a belief that feels true but is fundamentally false. The belief that if one analyzes enough, understands enough, overthinks enough, one will finally achieve certainty. The person believes, if I just think about this message from every possible angle, if I just consider every possible interpretation, eventually I will understand what it truly means. And once I understand, I will feel at peace. But this is a trap. Digital communication is inherently ambiguous. No amount of analysis can extract absolute certainty from an inherently uncertain medium. A text message that could mean 5 different things will still mean 5 different things no matter how many times it is analyzed. The analysis does not bring clarity. It generates more possibilities, more interpretations, more fears. The person caught in text overthinking is attempting to control the uncontrollable. They are trying to use rational analysis to manage what is fundamentally an interpersonal problem. The real issue, the person's fear of rejection, their need for reassurance, their uncertainty about the relationship, cannot be solved through analysis of text messages. But the person keeps trying, convinced that the solution lies in understanding the message more completely. Psychologists describe this as analysis paralysis. The person becomes so focused on analyzing possible meanings that they cannot take action. They cannot simply respond to the message or let it go, because doing so would mean accepting the ambiguity, accepting that they may never know for certain what the other person meant. And for people with anxious attachment styles, accepting ambiguity feels impossible. Post-event rumination, the tendency to engage in prolonged negative thinking about past social interactions, is closely linked to social anxiety. People ruminate about text messages the same way they ruminate about conversations they had hours or days earlier. They replay the interaction, analyzing every detail, searching for evidence of rejection or judgment. This rumination maintains and even intensifies anxiety. Research shows that the more a person ruminates about a social interaction, the more anxious they become about future interactions. The analysis does not reduce anxiety, it amplifies it. Yet the anxious person continues to ruminate, convinced that this time, the analysis will bring the relief they seek. There is also a phenomenon called catastrophic thinking that accompanies text overthinking. The person receives an ambiguous message and immediately constructs worst-case scenarios. A delayed response becomes evidence that the person no longer cares about the relationship. A brief message becomes proof that they are losing interest. A message without an emoji becomes a sign that they are angry. The person's mind jumps to catastrophe with remarkable speed and creativity. The search for certainty in text messages is also driven by the desire for control. The person believes, if I can understand this message perfectly, if I can read the other person's mind through their text, then I can prevent them from leaving. I can maintain control of the relationship. But this is a false sense of control. Relationships cannot be controlled through perfect analysis. People are unpredictable. Their moods shift. Their feelings change. No amount of textual analysis can prevent the fundamental uncertainty that comes with loving another person. The most insidious aspect of text overthinking is that it promises relief but never delivers. The person spends hours analyzing a message, convinced that this analysis will eventually bring peace. But it never does. Instead, the analysis generates new questions, new doubts, new possibilities. The person ends the analytical session more anxious than when they began. What keeps the person trapped in this cycle is hope. The hope that the next analysis will finally bring the clarity they seek. But that hope is misplaced. The clarity they seek does not lie in analyzing the text. It lies in accepting the ambiguity and learning to be okay with not knowing for certain what the other person meant. It lies in developing the trust in themselves and in the relationship that can coexist with uncertainty. Chapter 5. The moment of honest recognition. The turning point in text overthinking rarely comes as a dramatic revelation. More often, it arrives as exhaustion. The person realizes they have spent another evening analyzing text messages instead of being present with their life. They notice they have lost sleep because their mind would not stop analyzing messages. They realize that the constant searching for certainty in their digital communications is not bringing them peace. It is slowly destroying their mental health and their ability to be present in relationships. Some people reach the turning point through simple observation. They notice that the analysis has never actually resolved anything. They have overthought countless messages, and yet each new message brings the same anxiety, the same desperate search for meaning. The pattern is revealed for what it is, a loop that repeats but never resolves. Others reach the turning point when a relationship ends or becomes more distant, and they realize that their anxious analysis was not preventing the loss, it was contributing to it. The other person sensed the anxiety, they felt the neediness, they experienced the constant reassurance seeking as exhausting. The person realizes that their attempt to control the relationship through perfect communication was actually pushing the other person away. There is often a moment of brutal honesty. This is not working. This constant analysis is not making me feel better. It is making me feel worse. And it is not actually bringing me the certainty or reassurance I seek. This recognition is painful because it requires acknowledging that hours of analysis that felt productive, that felt like it was protecting the person, have actually been counterproductive. The turning point also involves recognizing that digital communication is simply more ambiguous than face-to-face communication. There is no amount of analysis that will change this fundamental fact. A text message will always lack the tone, gesture, and immediate feedback of in-person conversation. This is not a problem to be solved through greater effort or more thorough analysis. It is simply a characteristic of the medium. Some people reach the turning point through education. They learn about attachment styles and recognize themselves in descriptions of anxious attachment. They learn that their overthinking is a response to earlier relational experiences, not a reflection of the truth about the current relationship. They learn that there are other ways to relate to messages, other ways to relate to ambiguity. Others reach the turning point through therapy. A therapist helps them see the pattern, the analysis that promises certainty but delivers only more anxiety. The therapist helps them understand that certainty cannot be found in text messages and that seeking it there is futile. The therapist helps them develop tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty. The turning point is not the end of text overthinking, but it is the moment when the person becomes motivated to change. They have recognized that the current strategy is not working. They are ready to try a different approach. Chapter 6. Reclaiming presence and trust. Healing from text message overthinking is not about forcing the mind to stop analyzing. It is about developing a different relationship with analysis, about learning to let messages pass without needing to understand them completely, about building trust in oneself, in the other person, and in the relationship. Cognitive behavioral therapy is particularly effective for text anxiety. CBT helps the person identify the thought patterns that fuel overthinking and challenge them. When a person thinks, If they don't respond immediately, they don't care about me. CBT helps them examine this thought. Is it definitely true? What evidence contradicts it? What is a more balanced interpretation? Mindfulness practices are also crucial. Rather than trying to force the mind to stop analyzing, mindfulness teaches the person to observe their thoughts without judgment. When an anxious thought about a text message arises, the person notices it, acknowledges it, and lets it pass like a cloud moving across the sky. The goal is not to eliminate the thought, but to change the relationship with it. Reality testing is an important technique. When the person has constructed a catastrophic interpretation of a text message, they are encouraged to consider what actually happened as opposed to what they fear happened. Did the person actually say they were losing interest? Or is the person inferring that? Did the person actually express anger? Or is the person interpreting brevity as anger? Behavioral experiments can help. The person might deliberately wait longer than usual to respond to a message and observe that nothing terrible happens. They might send a message with less careful crafting than usual and discover that it is received fine. These small experiments help the person gather evidence that challenges their catastrophic beliefs. Building secure attachment is a longer-term goal. This involves developing a stronger sense of self-worth that is not dependent on reading the other person's mind through text messages. It involves developing trust that even if there are occasional misunderstandings, the relationship can survive them. It involves believing that the person is worthy of love, not because they are perfect communicators, but because they exist. Developing healthy communication habits is also important. The person learns to ask for clarification directly rather than analyzing. When uncertain about what a message means, they can simply ask, "I wasn't sure what you meant by that. Could you clarify?" This direct communication often provides far more actual information than any amount of analysis. Self-compassion is central to healing. The person learns to stop judging themselves for overthinking. They recognize that this pattern developed for a reason, that it was once protective, that it made sense given their early experiences. With this understanding, they can be gentler with themselves as they practice new ways of relating to text messages. Many people also benefit from adjusting their technology use. Turning off read receipts, typing indicators, and last seen timestamps removes information that fuels overthinking. These features often increase rather than improve communication quality. Removing them removes the additional data that the anxious mind uses for analysis. Chapter 7. The Peace of Letting Messages Be. There comes a moment when a text message arrives, and instead of immediately beginning to analyze it, the person simply receives it. They read the words. They form a reasonable interpretation, and they let it go. This moment may seem small, but it represents a profound shift. The freedom that comes from releasing the need to perfectly understand every text message is substantial. The person finds they have mental energy available for other things: their work, their hobbies, their presence with the people in front of them. They sleep better because their mind is not running loops at night, analyzing messages. They feel more relaxed in relationships because they are not constantly searching for hidden meanings. This freedom also includes accepting the fundamental ambiguity of digital communication. Text messages will always lack the fullness of in-person conversation. Misunderstandings will occasionally happen. Some messages will be unclear, and this is okay. This is simply the nature of the medium. The person learns that they can tolerate not knowing for certain what someone meant. They learn that uncertainty is not dangerous. They learn to ask directly when they need clarification rather than spiraling into analysis. They learn to trust their own interpretations rather than immediately doubting them. Most importantly, they learn that being present is more valuable than perfect understanding. Instead of analyzing a text message, they can actually engage with the person. Instead of trying to read the other person's mind, they can ask what the person actually means. Instead of constructing elaborate theories about what the message reveals, they can simply respond to the message as it is. The person who is healed from text overthinking is not someone who has learned to be perfectly logical or perfectly secure. They are someone who has learned to be good enough, to engage with digital communication in a way that is present and reasonably secure, without demanding absolute certainty or perfect communication. They have learned that love and connection can exist in the spaces between understanding, in the ambiguity and imperfection of how humans communicate with each other through screens and text. There is a quiet peace that comes when a text message is simply allowed to be what it is. A brief message sent across digital space, carrying whatever meaning the other person intended and whatever interpretation the recipient constructs. Not endlessly analyzed, not obsessively dissected, just received, understood reasonably, and met with a genuine response. This is the freedom that awaits on the other side of text overthinking. The freedom of being present fully in the imperfect reality of digital age communication. End of script. References. How to stop overthinking every text message. Text anxiety. Yes, it's a thing. Breaking free from analysis paralysis in relationships. Message anxiety. Why you overthink texts and how to stop. Cross-lagged analysis of rumination and social anxiety. Underlying role of rumination-mediated attachment style. Why we overthink text messages, the psychology and neuroscience. Post-event rumination and social anxiety review and meta-analysis. Anxious attachment style, signs, causes, and growth. Understanding silence and blocking in instant messaging. Anxious attachment style. From messaging to talking. The impact of social media on social anxiety. Anxious attachment disorder. In adults, causes, signs. Texting anxiety, what it is and how to deal with it. Text message, sentiment and depression, anxiety symptoms. Anxious attachment style, guide, causes and symptoms. Communication complications and the joys of overthinking. Repetitive negative thinking in social anxiety disorder. Miscommunication, trust, tone, and technology in a digital age. Navigating the perils of misunderstanding in messages. Cognitive behavioral therapy for anxious attachment style. The digital body language cues you send or don't send. Overcoming misunderstandings in text messages. Therapy for anxious attachment. Detecting emotional ambiguity in conversations. Understanding the misinterpretation of sentiment in communication. 9 signs you're healing your anxious attachment style. What is lost and gained when we communicate virtually. Understanding the mess in text messages. How to self-soothe anxious attachment triggers. What is nonverbal communication? Avoiding text message. Miscommunication. Tips for success. Healing an anxious attachment style. Nonverbal communication in a digital world. Texting is a brilliant way to miscommunicate. Attachment-based therapy. Interventions healing for adults. The loss of nonverbal and visual cues. I get you. People correctly interpret the tone of text messages.